So there I was, standing at the edge of what used to be a solid old mountain dam. Just a raging flood, tearing its way through rows of shiny new homes that the HOA had thrown up illegally on my property. Freeze frame. Yeah, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up unleashing a flood on an entire suburban neighborhood, and why nobody could do a damn thing to stop me. Well, it all kicked off when they decided they could take what my grandpa left behind. After Grandpa Joe passed, the last thing I thought I'd be doing was defending his biggest gift, the land. It was a real slice of the old world. Wide open fields, thick woods so dense you could get lost in them. And right in the middle? A mountain dam he built with his own 2 hands, after he survived one of the worst floods this area had ever seen. But this dam wasn't just some pile of rocks. It was solid stone and pure grit, a legacy made of stubbornness and smarts, passed down through our blood. The will was ironclad. Signed, witnessed, the whole deal. The land, the water rights, everything that touched the dirt, it was all mine. No question. For a while life was good. I worked a simple job in town, spent weekends walking the dam, fixing up old fences, and just watching the seasons roll by across those mountains. Then, trouble didn't knock. It whispered. I got this envelope in the mail, bright white with this fancy gold logo I didn't recognize. It said Willow Ridge Homeowners Association. I blinked at it. I wasn't part of any HOA. My land wasn't even inside town limits. Grandpa fought to keep it that way, zoning and all, decades back. Or so I thought. The letter, all polite and official, let me know that, surprise, my land was now under some new county maps that had just been approved. Community review, they called it. Curiosity turned to cold worry. I went to the next town meeting to get answers. And there he was, some smooth-talking guy in a suit, hair slicked back like he walked out of a toothpaste ad, showing off colorful maps of the expanded Willow Ridge community. Big smiles, big plans. And smack in the middle of those plans, in bold blue ink, was my land. Like it had never belonged to anyone before. I stood up, furious. Demanded to know what the hell was going on. That's when I met Karen Langford. She was the HOA president, self-proclaimed visionary, full-time pain in the ass. She gave me this fake confused look, like I was speaking Martian, then smiled and said it was all legal. Just a survey error, she said. A simple mistake now fixed. I walked out of there with a knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. Over the next couple weeks, crews showed up unannounced. Surveyors stomped all over my fields like they owned the place. Wooden stakes with those neon plastic flags started popping up everywhere, like weeds I couldn't pull fast enough. Then came the big machines. Bulldozers. Excavators. They started slicing roads through the pasture where Grandpa had taught me to ride a horse. In no time, concrete foundations were going down, fast and sloppy. I barely had time to breathe before I saw the signs go up. 58 luxury craftsman-style homes coming soon. I fought it every way I knew how. Hired a local lawyer, good guy, sharp, honest. But the second he saw the names on the paperwork, he got real quiet. County clerks dodged my calls. Property officers lost my reports. And Karen? She just smiled every time I raised hell, her little army of board members nodding along behind her like bobbleheads in a car. They painted me as the crazy one. Some bitter recluse clinging to dusty old deeds and outdated maps. Karen, yeah, that's what I'm calling her, put on this fake sweet voice and told me I should consider one of their generous offers to buy me out. Said I might want to take the deal before progress left me behind. I'll never forget the silence in that room when I stood up. Loud enough for every suit, realtor, and smug little clerk in the place to hear. I said, I will never sell what my family built. Not for any price. That's when everything changed. Up until then, it felt like slow-moving theft, all buried in paperwork and city planning. But after that moment, it turned ugly. Suddenly, I started finding code violation notices stuck on the windshield of my old truck. Made-up infractions. Fines piled up like junk mail. One morning, I walked outside and saw a sign jammed into my front yard. Future development site. No trespassing. My own damn yard. I called the sheriff's office. All they did was shrug and tell me it was a civil matter, Every door I knocked on, every official I asked for help, slammed shut. Karen wasn't just playing dirty. She had the whole game rigged. One kind-hearted clerk over at the county recorder's office quietly let me in on what was really happening. Turns out the Willow Ridge HOA had been greasing palms all over the place. Campaign donations, favors, zoning adjustments, waived inspections. Everything signed off with big smiles and backroom handshakes. I was outmatched, outspent, outvoted. Every time I filed a legal complaint, their lawyers fired back with threats. Said I was harassing them by questioning the new boundaries. That's when I realized I couldn't beat them head-on. Not yet. So, I changed tactics. I played the part of the beaten man. I stopped going to the town meetings. Let their little neon flags sit out in my fields. Even nodded and waved when Karen rolled by in her shiny new white Range Rover, grinning like a pageant queen. And while they patted themselves on the back, breaking ground, selling off lots like they were Roman emperors, I watched. I documented everything. Every shady construction shortcut. Every environmental rule they skipped. I took pictures of every torn-up tree, every snapped fence post, every violation they thought nobody noticed. I recorded every smug conversation, saved every threatening letter, and pulled zoning approvals from public records late at night like I was digging through a crime scene. All of it, stored in boxes, stacked neatly in my grandfather's old workshop beneath the dam. I didn't make a sound. Didn't lift a hand to stop them. Just watched them pour a fortune into a place they didn't understand. They ran water lines through unstable ground. Built cookie-cutter mansions right on top of old flood basins. Never even bothered with a geological survey. They thought I'd given up. They thought they could bend the land to their blueprints. But what they didn't get is that land like this, old land, country land, it remembers. It doesn't forget. And folks like me? We don't break just because someone waves a fancy document around. They thought they owned it just because they signed a piece of paper. But paper tears. Ink fades. And when the rain comes, real rain, and the mountain starts to groan and growl, paper won't save you. They stole my fields, my woods, my dam. They started a war without even knowing what kind of battlefield they were standing on. And deep down I knew the reckoning was coming. As sure as gravity, and twice as cruel. All I had to do was wait for the storm. See that dam? It's not just some structure. It's been the valley's silent protector for generations. A thick, heavy wall of stone and earth, built by hand, held together by sweat, stubbornness, and the painful memory of a disaster this town swore it would never forget. 80 years ago, long before anyone talked about lot numbers and cul-de-sacs, before roads cut through the mountains like scars, there was a flood. Not just a big one. A biblical flood, the kind that didn't just wash away houses, it erased entire families. Back when that flood hit, my grandfather was just a young man. He was out there shoulder to shoulder with his neighbors, hauling sandbags, trying desperately to hold back a wall of water and mud that didn't give a damn about fences, deeds, or dreams. But they lost. The whole valley went under. And when the flood finally pulled back, it left behind nothing but wreckage, broken homes, destroyed fields, and tombstones where families used to live. That was the day Grandpa made a vow. He swore it would never happen again. He wasn't a trained engineer. But he was stubborn, the kind of stubborn that gets things done when everyone else quits. Over years, not months, not a summer project, but years, he and a few others who made it through started building the dam. Piece by piece. Stone by stone. This wasn't some concrete monstrosity with warning sirens and steel gates. This was old school. Timber. Faith. A massive wall carved into the mountainside to keep the valley safe from whatever fury the sky could throw down. And it worked. While towns all around us got hit with flash floods and mudslides, our little valley stayed dry. That dam held firm through decades of wild storms. It caught the runoff, calmed the floodwaters, and sent them harmlessly down creeks in the lowlands. Over time, people stopped thinking about the flood, forgot what the dam had done, forgot why it was even there. But the land remembered. And water? Water always finds its way home. So when the HOA rolled in with their polished blueprints and fancy dreams, they didn't even blink at the dam. To them, It was just an ugly hump in the way of their perfect suburb. Something to flatten and pave over. They blocked runoff channels, paved straight across natural creek beds, bulldozed old flood zones to make room for cul-de-sacs and decorative fountains. And then came the day I'll never forget, the final insult. I was watching from behind a line of trees, hidden, quiet, when a backhoe operator, wearing a neon vest and looking like he'd never seen a shovel before, started digging right into the outer shoulder of the dam. He didn't cut deep enough to break it, not yet. But it was enough to weaken the structure. Just enough to start something. It was like ripping open a wound that hadn't bled in 50 years. One good storm, and that cut would turn into a crack. Then a break. Then a flood. And I wanted to scream. I wanted to sprint down that hill and stand between them and the bones of my grandfather's work. But I didn't. I just stood there, fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms, and I stayed hidden. Because by then, I understood what they didn't. They didn't just disrespect the land, they didn't even know it. In their eyes, they had already won. The papers were signed, the maps redrawn, the politicians bought and paid for. To them, I was just some relic. A ghost in the woods, clinging to a past nobody remembered. They had no clue they were building their perfect little neighborhood on top of a time bomb. Every broken rock, every choked-off stream, every blocked drainage route, it was all quietly building towards something. The land was counting. Waiting. They thought they beat me. They didn't realize they were living on borrowed time. So, I started preparing the only way I could. I stopped walking the dam in daylight. Stopped patching the leaks after storms. I let the intake channels fill with leaves and branches. Let the pressure build behind the wall little by little. I disappeared into the trees. Became a ghost to them. Just a weird old guy who wandered the woods while they grilled hot dogs on brand new patios and planted solar lights on sidewalks that wouldn't last a year. And then, the fall rains came. That year, the rains came early. I sat on my porch with a warm mug of coffee, watching puddles form in the freshly cut lawns of houses that didn't belong. By the time winter bled into a sloppy, chaotic spring, I was taking slow walks along the edge of the dam. Quiet, careful ones. I watched the cracks grow a little wider with every freeze and thaw. Noticed how the ground had started to sag, right where that backhoe had torn into the outer edge months earlier. Now, let me be clear, I didn't make the dam fail. That would have been criminal. All I did was stop saving it. I let nature do what it always does when humans forget they're not in charge. I stepped aside and let physics, water, and gravity, laws older than any HOA regulation, get back to work. The truth is, everything Willow Ridge built, all their neat streets and sparkling sidewalks, just made the fall come faster. Their fancy storm drains clogged the second they were tested. Their spotless lawns couldn't hold the dirt. Topsoil slid right off into the already overflowing ponds. They rerouted the creeks and carved up the land like it was theirs. But the mountain? The mountain doesn't give a damn about property lines or development plans. It listens to one thing, gravity. And water always finds its way down. The first few big storms were just warnings. Little sinkholes opened up in spots that hadn't even been finished yet. The HOA blamed it on unusual weather patterns. Typical. Their solution? More fill dirt. More quick fixes. More money thrown at the problem like that was ever going to stop it. They had emergency meetings and passed the costs on to new homeowners, calling it environmental stabilization. All the while, the ground underneath was tightening like a spring. I stayed quiet through it all. Kept my head down. Took care of the few corners of land they hadn't bulldozed. When I ran into Becky, their queen bee of an HOA president, at the gas station, I smiled and listened to her drone on about how thriving the expansion was. I didn't say a word about the fractures underneath her foundation. By then, it wasn't even about getting even anymore. It was about restoring balance. This land wasn't just dirt and trees, it had memory. My grandfather built that dam to protect people, not to be buried beneath sidewalks and real estate signs. And I believed, with everything in me, that when people ignore the land long enough, it eventually reminds them who's really in charge. They messed with a sleeping giant. I didn't have to wake it up. All I had to do was wait. The rainy season was coming. And this time? It wasn't going to be gentle. The first big storm rolled in like a slow drumbeat. The kind you feel in your chest. Thunder so low and deep, the mountains themselves seemed to hum with it. I sat on the porch of Grandpa Walt's old place, that beat-up thermos of coffee in my hands, and watched as a thick sheet of rain crawled across the valley. The mountains disappeared behind a wall of mist. Somewhere far off, thunder grumbled, low, rattling, hungry. Down in the middle of Willow Ridge, those fancy porch lights clicked on like little yellow fireflies, blinking into the gloom. But I knew that land. Knew it better than any of them ever would. I knew how the clay would swell and shift in the rain. I knew how shallow their pretty green lawns were, how easily they'd slide once the old water channels opened back up beneath them. And I knew, without a doubt, that the dam, wounded and ignored, wouldn't be there to save them this time. As the storm pounded the valley, hour after hour, I pulled on my old work boots and stepped into the night. The rain soaked through my jacket as I walked the edges of what used to be my fields, now patched with half-finished homes and brand-new roads. I could see it happening right in front of me. Long cracks, sharp and jagged, splitting open the brand-new sidewalks. Tiny spiderweb fractures creeping across the foundations of houses no one had even moved into yet. Water pooled where there were no drains, gathering into shallow lakes in cul-de-sacs, slowly working its way into the basements of the most expensive homes. I passed Jessica's place, that oversized mess of fake brick and white columns sitting smug at the top of the ridge. She was standing in the giant front window, phone glued to her ear, flailing her arms. I couldn't hear her through the glass, but I didn't have to. I knew that voice. She was blaming the weather. Bad luck. Probably blaming me too. Blaming anyone except herself. Across the subdivision, construction crews in neon vests scrambled to stack sandbags and dig emergency trenches with backhoes that only made things worse. They moved dirt from one problem to another, redirected water with plastic barriers and blind hope. It was almost beautiful in a cruel, poetic way. Like watching a sandcastle slowly get swallowed by the rising tide. And that was just the first storm. The second one hit 3 days later. Colder, nastier. It rolled out of the mountains like it had a grudge. I felt it coming before I saw a single cloud. There was a weight in the air, thick and heavy. My skin buzzed. The kind of pressure that makes your teeth ache. The dam, already cracked and tired, groaned under the weight of all that rain. What had been tiny leaks now looked like scars, muddy and wide. I saw a breach open up, no bigger than a man's fist, spitting out a thick stream of brown water. Then another. Then another. I didn't need a weather app or warning sirens to know what was about to happen. I had my grandfather's instincts. And they were howling. I climbed to the highest ridge, boots sinking into wet ground, rain smacking me in the face, and I watched. The dam gave one final groan, like a dying breath. Then the ground shuddered beneath me, deep, low, and mean, and the whole thing broke. It wasn't some giant movie explosion. It was slower, crueler. A steady collapse as thousands of tons of pent-up water, angry and wild, pushed through the wound and charged down the mountain. It ripped trees apart like they were paper. Followed the path it had always taken, long before anybody tried to tame it. And that path led straight to Willow Ridge. The first row of houses, still dressed up with "for sale" banners and 4th of July bunting, vanished in seconds under a wall of roaring, muddy water. I watched rooftops lift like feathers, walls buckle and fold like wet cardboard. Pavement cracked open. Minivans, garden gnomes, mailbox clusters, all swallowed up. Power lines snapped and danced in the flood, sparking like angry snakes. Jessica's house, her pride and joy, held out just a little longer than the rest. I saw her on the front porch, still screaming into her phone, frozen like a deer in headlights. The water reached her lawn, paused, almost like it was savoring the moment, and then surged. The ground beneath her picture-perfect grass turned to soup. The house groaned, leaned like it had too much to drink, then cracked clean in two. One half slid forward into the chaos. The other folded backward, slow and dramatic. Those giant white columns snapped like twigs. It was over in minutes. Then came the emergency crews. Too late, of course. Always too late. They trudged through waist-deep water with radios hissing and faces full of shock. Barked orders, strung up caution tape that sagged in the rain, and tried to make sense of the wreckage. The mountain didn't give a damn about their protocols. And water sure as hell wasn't listening to emergency sirens. I stood at a distance, dry and calm, my heartbeat slow and steady. Part of me thought I should feel guilty. But the louder part, the honest part, felt nothing but grim satisfaction. I tried to warn them. Way before the bulldozers showed up. Before Jessica's Range Rover tore ruts through my grandfather's fields, I'd sent official notices to the county, warnings about the dam's condition, about how dangerous it was to disturb the land. I had it all, letters, emails, certified receipts, notarized, time-stamped, all tucked away, safe and sound. Legally, I was covered. Morally, I'd done my part. But they didn't listen. Too proud, too sure of themselves. They tossed my warnings aside like trash. So, when the sky finally cleared and the flood settled into silence, the insurance adjusters came crawling in like buzzards. They picked through the wreckage, walking through ankle-deep mud with clipboards and metal rods, poking at crumbled driveways and what was left of polished foundations. Claims were filed, they said. Claims were denied. Acts of God, the insurance reps called it, with a shrug. Negligence, the lawyers murmured behind closed doors. Jessica tried to sue everybody, county officials, developers, contractors, even me. None of it stuck. The truth was written all over their own documents. Their plans. Their signatures. Their greed. And just like that, the mighty Willow Ridge HOA, once smug, once untouchable, was neck-deep in lawsuits. Angry homeowners. Bankrupt contractors. State regulators sniffing around illegal land use deals. Jessica's name? It became a joke around town. A warning passed over cold beers and backyard fences. Within 6 months, Willow Ridge was condemned. Nothing left but mud and silence. A soggy monument to arrogance. A reminder of a simple truth. The land always wins. As for me, I stayed quiet, kept my head down, watched the weeds crawl back over the ruined streets, watched the birds return to shattered rooftops, watched the creeks dig new paths, right where sidewalks used to be. Nature had done what I couldn't. Justice didn't come from a courtroom, it came rolling down that mountain in a wave. And somehow, against all odds, my grandfather's land, scarred but still standing, had been given another chance. The flood wasn't even done carving its path when the news vans showed up. They swarmed in like flies. Satellite dishes popped up on roofs. Reporters clutching mics and umbrellas stumbled through the muck, snapping pictures of half-drowned furniture and splintered picket fences. In no time, the headlines lit up every screen and front page. Tragedy in Willow Ridge. 58 luxury homes destroyed by negligence. Cameras rolled. Anchors stood solemn in the drizzle, delivering their tragic soundbites to viewers across the state. And there was Jessica, no makeup, hair wild, eyes hollow, trying her best to control the story. It was the weather, she pleaded. It was an unexpected act of nature. It wasn't my fault. But the cameras didn't care. They love a good villain. And there she was, Range Rover sunk in a sinkhole, $1 million house split like a soggy cracker, perfect for the part. And when the real questions started, when the investigators started poking into the shady approvals and backroom zoning deals, oh, that's when it all started unraveling. Because if you bulldoze a dam, build homes on shaky earth, and shove through plans nobody voted for, well, eventually, the paper trail runs deeper than the mud. Less than a week after the flood, the county announced it would launch an independent inquiry. By the end of that same month, the state attorney general got involved, opening a full-scale investigation into how Willow Ridge was ever approved in the first place. Subpoenas flew. Public records were dragged into daylight. And the cozy financial ties between the HOA board and local officials? Exposed like a nest of worms under a lifted rock. Everything Amber had built, every polished lie, every greased handshake, came apart in full view. Tips, bribes, fake easement filings, falsified environmental reports. It all came spilling out, one sickening, ugly truth after another. Homeowners, Most of them still furious over losing everything, jumped onto class action lawsuits. They sued Amber, the entire board, the developers, even the banks that funded it all. Everyone who'd had a hand in the mess. Names that once made folks nervous in town halls now showed up in bold print, right next to words like embezzlement, fraud, and gross negligence. I didn't say a word. Didn't need to. I'd set the trap a long time ago. Before the first nail. Before the first truck rolled in. All Amber and her crew had done was walk into it, blind, proud, and deaf to anyone who warned them. Best part? Every single insurance claim they filed got tossed out. Denied. The companies had too much proof, photos, warnings, ignored reports. There wasn't a dime paid out. The lawsuits bled what little the board had left. Amber's precious white Range Rover was the first to go. Then her jewelry. Then whatever was left of her house, after the floodwaters and scavengers had picked it clean. Word was she moved in with a cousin 2 counties over. Taking temp jobs. Bitter enough to sour milk with a glance. The rest of the board scattered. Bankruptcies, subpoenas, scorched reputations. No one came back. While they pointed fingers and hid from their own wreckage, I got to work. Quietly, carefully. I filed a petition for adverse possession. The law was on my side now. They'd walked away. Abandoned it all. Bit by bit, one flooded parcel at a time, the broken pieces of Willow Ridge came back to me. Streets, lots, swamps, all of it. Nobody challenged it. Nobody even showed up. Too broke. Too ashamed. Too busy pretending it had never happened. Within a year, the land was legally mine again. The first thing I did was fix the dam. I spent nearly the whole summer hauling stone, shoveling gravel, laying new footings, sometimes with the help of a few old-timers who remembered how things used to be before ambition poisoned the soil. We didn't make speeches. Didn't call the news. We worked under that same sun that had once baked my grandfather's neck while he built the first dam. And this one? It wasn't flashy. But it was solid. Strong enough to hold back 10 floods. Strong enough to remind anyone who looked that some things are bigger than politics. Bigger than greed. Bigger than the little minds that think nature can be bought off or bossed around. As the dam came back to life, I turned to the fields. The sidewalks were gone. So were the fake lampposts and empty driveways. I let wild grass grow over the lots. Let the creeks find their old paths again. The deer came back. So did the foxes. And the herons. The land was healing. Finally. And then, on a crisp fall morning with frost still clinging to the ground, I dragged that old cedar post up from the new gravel road that connected to the county highway. Dug it deep into the ground and bolted a heavy wooden sign onto it, hand-carved by a local craftsman who still knew how to work with his hands. It didn't say much, but it said enough. Welcome to High Water Acres. We respect the land here. And right below that, in smaller letters, the words that had become my guiding principle. Built by nature, protected by memory. I stepped back, wiped the sweat off my forehead, and just smiled. It wasn't just a sign. It was a message. A boundary. A promise. There'd never be another HOA setting foot on this soil. No smooth-talking developer would ever try to bury the mountain's history under brochures and blueprint lies again. This land had been earned through hard work, loss, and a whole lot of stubbornness. It belonged to those who remembered, not to those who forgot. The morning after I planted that sign, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, filled up my old dented thermos, and hiked up to the dam. I sat right there on the crest, where the stones were still slick with dew, and looked out over the valley. The sun was just starting to burn away the mist, and as it did, the world opened up, fields glowing gold in the autumn light, creeks catching the sun like silver threads stitched through the earth. You could still see hints of what used to be Willow Ridge, if you looked closely. A twisted row of broken fence posts here, a crooked manhole cover poking through the grass there. But even those would disappear with time. Nature's patient like that. Always takes back what's hers. I sipped my coffee and let the stillness wrap around me. I thought about Grandpa Walt, his weathered hands stacking stone, shaping earth, chasing hope like it was something you could hold on to. I thought about the flood that took so much from him. And the flood that, in its own rough way, gave everything back to me. And yeah, I thought about Amber too. Wherever she'd ended up. Probably still angry, still pointing fingers, still clinging to her grudges like driftwood in a storm. She built her little empire on stolen ground and sweet-talking lies. But me? I built this on patience. On memory. On truth. In the end, only one of us had anything real to hold on to. The mountain rumbled beneath me, not loud, not angry. Just a low, steady kind of sound. Like it was satisfied. Older than fences. Older than lawsuits. Older than greed. It was the kind of sound that said, as long as someone keeps listening, the land will endure. I raised my thermos and offered a quiet toast. To the past. To the land. To what comes next. And I smiled as the sun rose higher over high water acres, flooding the valley in light.